Bueno, pues muy buenas noches. Qué padre que todos estemos aquí. Se llegó el día de la charla de Mike y March. Mike y March Fenelon. Y
bueno, pues para quienes no los conocen, como tal cual se mandó en el flyer, Mike y March pertenecen a nuestra comunidad del Instituto de Familias. Ellos viven en Milwaukee, que es una ciudad muy reconocida para Schoenstatt, porque ahí pues el padre fundador, nuestro padre Kentenich, vivió su exilio durante 14 años y ellos tuvieron la gracia de conocerlo gracias a sus familias, ¿no? Sus papás de ambos conocieron bien al padre, el padre visitó sus hogares, bendijo sus santuarios hogar, así que tienen una experiencia muy linda junto al padre Kentenich. Y bueno, el día de hoy el tema que nos van a hablar es justamente pues sobre su santuario hogar, su testimonio, una experiencia viva y familiar de la mano del padre fundador. Sabemos que van a disfrutarla mucho y bueno, para los que
no sabemos bien inglés, la charla se va a grabar, se va a publicar en YouTube y la publicación de YouTube va a tener subtítulos en español. ¿Sí? Entonces, y en alemán también. Bueno, welcome.
O sea, si saben de alguien que no haya podido venir, la plática se va a transmitir ahorita por YouTube, ya se está, no sé si ya se esté o no transmitiendo, y nomás ténganos paciencia para esa traducción, pero llegará, porque a todos nos conviene, en verdad que es un testimonio muy, muy lindo, que vale la pena que lo escuchemos, pues el mayor número de personas que podamos de los que pertenecemos al movimiento. Muchas gracias. We are glad.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's a real joy to be here once again. We were here 12 years ago, and it's been a long 12 years. We've traveled around the world since then. Mexico was the first country to invite us to speak of our experiences with Father Kentenich. And from that time on, we've been to 14 countries and traveled thousands of miles with the experiences of Father Kentenich. So we're happy to be back in Mexico once again. We're happy to share with you our experiences of growing up as children with Father Kentenich and with our families in Schoenstatt. For us, it's always a joy to share these experiences because we came to know a father as a real father. For many, he was a founder, or in South America, Chile, the prophet. But in Milwaukee, he was a father to all at that time. You will notice that when we speak of Father Kentenich, many times we will just say Father, because that's what he was in Milwaukee. The church had removed him from the head of Schoenstatt, and so he was just a father to his family, a father to us, a father to his children. And we think that in Milwaukee, one of the special gifts of the Blessed Mother to Father Kentenich was that he was allowed to be a real father and show what that is to others.
One of the Schoenstatt fathers told us that you do not really know a person until you know their name, their face, and their home shrine. So we want to introduce you to our family and our home shrine. We were blessed with 2 children, the most wonderful children in the world, of course. Yeah. And our daughter Sarah is in the center. She's single and works as a massage therapist in Milwaukee. Our son Stephen with his wife Mary have our 5 little grandchildren. We have James, who's 10, Ellie, 8, Liam is 7, Greta is 4, and little Sylvie is 2. Uh-oh. And they are the joy of our lives. Yeah. And this is our home shrine. Our name of our home shrine is Home in the Hand of Our Father. This is our home. We live in McHenry, Illinois, which is just between Milwaukee and Chicago. It's kind of out in the country, a beautiful area. And this is our backyard, our patio. Yeah. Woo, yeah. Yeah, and we live next to a conservation land, and it's just beautiful. Yeah.
This photo was taken in November of 1964 when Father came to our home shrine for the naming of the home shrine. And you can see there's quite a few children here. I'm the oldest of 12, and I'm the one on the left-hand side with the tie and glasses. Yeah. Yeah. So I think we had about 8 children here, and my mother was pregnant, I can see, and we had a few more after Father left Milwaukee. My parents were a good Catholic couple. They went to Catholic schools. They came from good Catholic. Father was busy in numerous apostolic activities with the parish. He was in the Legion of Mary. And so many evenings he would be gone with prayer meetings or visiting hospitals or elderly homes. But it was causing a problem with all these children at home and my mother having to take care of them throughout all the day when my father was at work, and then in the evenings, and then on the weekends. This started to cause a great tension in the family, in their marriage. And it was at this exact time that they met Father. My father in the Legion of Mary, he would go out and knock on doors and invite people to the Legion of Mary. Near our house was a parish in where the Schoenstatt sisters taught in the school. So my father knocked on their door one day and introduced himself and asked if they wanted to be in the Legion of Mary. I don't think they accepted, and they, after a number of visits, they invited my father and mother to come to meet Father Kentenik in the Monday night talks. These were the talks that Father gave to the married couples for almost 12 years. Every Monday night, he would meet with a group of couples and give talks. So my father and mother in 1960 came to one of those Monday night talks, and the Schoenstatt sister there, that was Father's secretary, introduced my father and mother to Father Kentenik. And my father was one that did not like to be pushed into anything. He had to make his own decision what he was going to do. And so he told Father Kentenik, if I have to choose between the Legion of Mary and Schoenstatt, I choose the Legion of Mary. The Schoenstatt sister was horrified that my father would speak to Father Kentenik like this. But Father said nothing. He just smiled and looked at my father in the eyes. 6 months later, my mother and father made their covenant of love and their blank check. And a year later, they made their inscriptio. Father had totally won their hearts.
this is my family when Father came to our home in 1959. I'm in the middle of 7 children, so I'm the little one on the bottom. And it was very similar in my home with my parents. They were having some real challenges because my father also, after work, he would be doing many good things for the church. You know, he was in the choir and different things, but it took him out of the home. And my mother was really having a challenge with this. And I remember I was 5 years old then, and I remember hearing my mother cry at times. And that, you know, just really affected a little 5-year-old's heart. And then it was just at this time that my parents began to look for something spiritual for them as a couple, because I think they could sense something was very wrong. And my father was introduced through someone he worked for. He was an electrician, and when he was in a home working, he saw the picture of the Blessed Mother, and he asked about the picture. And so this woman explained to him, and then eventually he invited my parents to come to meet Father Kentenich. And so they went, and as soon as they heard Father Kentenich speak, he spoke about marriage, the marriage sacramentality, the Holy Family, and family life. And as soon as they heard him, they said they've never heard a priest speak the way this priest spoke to them about marriage, and they fell in love. And so they continued on, and I don't know when, I think they made their covenant within 3 months, if I remember right. It was like 3 months after. They were just taken by all the beautiful ideals that Father spoke about.
These are what we call in Milwaukee the pioneer couples. They were the first couples to come together with Father for these Monday night talks and hear and take to their hearts his message. They were a little bit older. Most of them had their children raised and had left home. And Father gave them topics that were relevant for their lives. Shortly around 1959, 1960, a new group of young couples with young children and families that were still having children started to come to these Monday night talks. And Father immediately changed the topic from the topics of the church or other topics that he was giving the pioneers to the marriage and children's education. And Father could sense that there was the needs of these families and immediately spoke to them of what those needs were. Oh, and it was at this time, I forgot here. It was at this time also, it was with these couples, these younger couples, that the question was asked to Father, can the Blessed Mother really come down into our homes like the shrine? And that was the start of the birth of the home shrine, that process. They had such a need. The 1960s were a very rough time in the church and in the world and the young people. And they just felt at a loss of how to educate their children in these modern times. And that's what Father heard. And so for the next year, they worked on this idea of the home shrine in 1962. And that was the birth where our parents came in with the home shrine and this new springtime in Schoenstatt with the family movement.
It's always interesting to look back to the roots of the home shrine. It's a legacy to Father's great vision for the needs of the family in our time. Already in 1936, Father spoke to the Schoenstatt girls' youth in Germany about building Schoenstatt families, about creating Schoenstatt customs, of taking the Schoenstatt picture into the home. And then immediately he used that famous quote from 1929, "In the shadow of this shrine, the destiny of the church and world will be essentially co-determined for centuries to come." So already back in 1936, he was equating the home and taking the Blessed Mother into the home as a shrine. But life yet had to develop this vision that Father was speaking about. In 1948, the next big step took place from Brazil when he wrote the letter of Santa Maria to the families in Schoenstatt, Germany, where he said, "Take the picture of the Blessed Mother and give her a place of honor in your homes. Then they will become little shrines, which will prove to be a source of grace, create holy family atmosphere, and form holy family members." And Father still waited for life to take place. Then in the 1950s and 60s in Argentina, the Schoenstatt Corner started to take on the form of customs of what would eventually become the home shrine. In Germany, also in the 1950s, a living shrine stream started among a few families, but it never seemed to go very far. And Father waited for divine providence to speak. When Father left Dachau in 1945, on returning to Schoenstatt, he had said that if he had the time, if he wasn't occupied with many other things, he would like to place all of his efforts in working with families. But of course, he was so busy when he returned to Schoenstatt with all of the Schoenstatt family work, and that he was unable to do this great desire of his heart. And then divine providence spoke. And 7 years later, he was sent to Milwaukee, that out of the way place where a mother gave him the open door to spend that desired time with the families. And with these families, he was still patient. He watched and he waited.
Father never forced anything. He might have an idea, but he did not push it onto the families or anybody. He would see how the Holy Spirit, how the Blessed Mother led them into the idea themselves sometimes. He always looked for what divine providence wanted to say. And then he waited and watched for life to develop. These next pictures are taken in 1964 when Father came to our home to dedicate our home shrine and our living shrine. As we said, in 1962, those ladies asked that question, could the Blessed Mother come down and live in our homes like the shrine? And it was suggested to the families by the sister that was working with them, with Father, could you make a living shrine? And they said, because Father said, we don't want a shrine of dead stones. We want a shrine, a living shrine. So with that idea, the individual members of each family picked a symbol from the shrine. It's like when you build a shrine and you pick symbols to different communities to conquer that symbol. But this is the symbol that they would the symbol that touched their heart, that spoke to them from their either personal ideal or their character or something that they just fell in love with in the shrine. And then try to embody that. how could I be the cross? How do I accept hard decisions? Those types of things. And so for a year, the families would pick these symbols, and then Father would go around to each family and dedicate those living shrines in their home shrine. And he would say a little prayer for each member's symbol in those living shrine dedications. And during this time, he worked very closely with the families. He knew the families. Many of them went to confession to him. They visited him in his office. He would meet them in the shrine. So he was always in contact with families, and he knew what their lives were like and what their needs were. And so the families that year worked on this living shrine. The symbols in my family, most of them, some of them revolve around the Holy Mass and the front area of the shrine around the altar. My parents were very dedicated to going to daily Mass, and for them that was they wanted to make this living shrine very close to that. So we had many symbols since we had a lot of children. We have the altar, the tabernacle, the crucifix, the sanctuary light, the Holy Spirit, the St. Michael. We had the wine for Mass. We had the host. So we had numerous symbols. And many years later, my mother said, every time I go to Mass, I can see my family. No matter where they are in the world, my family is in front of me when I go to Mass. And this is the type of attachment that Father was looking for, that we bring to life the shrine. And it's not just a place we go to, but it's part of us. My mother's shrine, or my mother's symbol, is the wine for Mass, the grapes. And my father's symbol is the chalice. So they picked two symbols that signified a unity, symbolizing the unity of marriage, the transformation of something that's just physical to something that's supernatural. And those were ideals for them to strive for. So as I said, Father said a little prayer for each person's symbol, and I'd like to read just a few sentences from my mother's what he prayed for my mother and what he prayed for my father. And you can see how deep Father took this and how important he took this idea of the living shrine. He said for my mother, the wine needed for Holy Mass must be pure. It must be authentic. There must be nothing artificial in the mother of this family. As we see the Blessed Mother as the ideal of womanly nobility, so the whole being of this mother of the family should be as genuine as that of the Blessed Mother. Mass wine is changed into the blood of Christ. The mother of the family also wants to be elevated into a supernatural atmosphere. Hence, all who are under the mother's influence should experience an extraordinarily warm and supernatural atmosphere which radiates from her and draws everything upwards with her. And for my father, he prayed, the Father wants to be the chalice. This means that everything in him should be like pure gold. In his whole being, a golden Father strives to become a living image of the eternal Father. In the chalice, the wine is changed into the blood of Christ. In a similar way, the Father wants to embody the ideal of an interiorly changed person, a completely changed person, a completely transformed father of the family. And Father was speaking to simple people. These weren't theologians, they weren't sisters, they weren't fathers, but these thoughts are very profound and deep that Father wanted the couples He didn't give them low ideals. He gave them very high ideals to strive for. So this is my mother, and with her symbol there with the wine. This is my brother Bernard. And Bernard wanted to be Father Kentenich in the shrine. And the sister said, no, nobody can be Father Kentenich in the shrine. But Bernard wanted to be Father Kentenich. So when Father came, Father did a beautiful thing. He changed the emphasis from being on him to the Heavenly Father. So Bernard's symbol is the eye of the Father. And Father said to Bernard, he said, Bernard should give all of his strength of his life for others, be a father for his brothers and sisters. We don't know yet how great all the needs of this family will be. Father was talking to a 5-year-old boy, and he was giving him a responsibility in the family. He connected with these shrine symbols. He connected people in the family so that you really cared and you had a mission in the family. And then you can ask, well, can a 5-year-old boy take this forward and realize this ideal? And Bernard is one of the most fatherly men I know besides my own father. He married Marge's sister. And they have 11 children. He is a man of deep prayer. He gets up and walks to Mass a mile to the church every morning before work at 6 o'clock in the morning. He is totally dedicated to adoration, to his wife, and to his children. He has given up all his personal pursuits beyond his work to be with his family. At the end of this evening, Bernard came to give Father Kentenich his hat. And Father took his hat and put it on Bernard's head, and that picture was taken. We like to say that Father was saying, you chose a very good symbol. This is my sister Anne, and she's the tabernacle in the living shrine. And you can see in this picture how Father related to even the small babies in the family. It was very informal. There was no strangeness with the relationship of Father Kentenich with the families. He was a father, and we saw him as that. And remember this little baby, because I have a story later on about Anne. This is my sister Jean, and she's the altar in the living shrine. And you can see when Father would come over, all the children would gather around him. We didn't stand away from Father. Everybody gathered around him, and you'd be jumping up and down saying, Father, Father, trying to get his attention. And to either speak a little something to him, to show him your latest toy or whatever. And by this time, Father knew some English. So he could talk with the families in English. When he said a prayer, he would pray in German because he thought better that way. But for a general conversation, we could speak with him in English. At home, we had a puppet show, and one of the characters was the devil. So I don't know if one of the children showed Father this or Father saw it somewhere, but he picked the devil up by the neck and started shaking it. And you can see of all the photos with Father, with the family, this is the most serious. And it's like even through a little gesture, he's telling us about the supernatural world, the reality. One of the things that Father was very impressed upon the families was you have to create family customs, especially those customs that relate to the church and the liturgical year. how do you bring your faith into everyday life? And so we, at the end of Father's visits, in our house, we had a big house, and we could walk around the inside of the house from room to room to room to room. And we would all get a candle, and we would light the candle, and then we would go around in a procession with Father at the very end and sing the Schoenstatt songs. And, you know, many things about visiting with Father, I forgot. I remember because my mother told me, or I see the pictures. But one of the things I do remember is those processions around the house. So it sort of made the point that Father was making. You need to develop real cultural and religious symbols and life to express to the family, to the children, of how do we live our faith.
Once again, here's my family. We knew Father over a period of 7 years. So the children grew, and Father would tell the parents, when you have small children, you have small problems. When you have big children, you have big problems. And you can see a couple of my teenage brothers, they're not too happy to be in this picture. You know? But Father spoke to the parents particularly about the teenagers and the importance of this time in their life. And he told them that those teenage years couldn't be the loneliest time in a person's life. That he said it could even be like being in prison. And we thought, well, maybe he was speaking of his own, you know, tragedies he went through and time of trial. But he helped our parents during those difficult times of the 60s to teach the children about inner freedom, you know, how not to force the children into things, but to draw them in with an atmosphere of love and joy. And so our parents, you know, slowly learned this, how to, you know, be more open to the Blessed Mother's work in their hearts and not force, because that would, you know, take them away more than help them come forward. So this was really, you know, we really feel that Father helped our family so much in learning how to just grow naturally in that supernatural world with our parents themselves, trying to educate themselves with the Blessed Mother. So this was very, very helpful in that time. And Father came to both of our families' homes about 10 times. You know, all the times he came were for something with the home shrine. You know, you would invite him and he would come for, you know, blessing of the home shrine, the living shrine. And so we just had such a fortunate time that we could just say, Father, come to our home, and he would come. And here my father and my brother and sisters are showing Father a book of our symbols. We all, you know, made a scrapbook of each one of our symbols. And, you know, Father really gave our families this great gift of the living shrine, which unites us in attachments to one another in the homeless time, where you see the family members every time, sort of like Mike's mother in the Mass. Every time we go and visit the shrine, no matter where in the world, we see our whole family there in the shrine. And you just are drawn together spiritually. Oh, yeah. This is my baby sister, Barb, and she's the one who married Bernard with the hat. Yeah. That have their 11 children. Yeah. And I want to share with you, like Mike did, of some of Father's words for my parents' symbols that they chose in his prayer for the symbols. My father is St. Peter in the shrine, the keys. Father's words for my father, some of them, very short. By his word and example, the father of this family must open the gates of heaven for each member of the family. This will depend on the degree he himself lives in heaven and converses in heaven. And my mother is the cross. And Father prayed for her. The mother of this family must teach herself to hang on the cross as often as there are members and children in the family. When I cannot reach them anymore, when they are on their own, I can reach them through hanging on the cross for them. So such beautiful, deep words. And this spiritual world became an everyday reality. And we've seen this reality lived, through all the challenges in our lives. This was a foundation, like an anchor for us to hang on to. And my symbol is the sanctuary light, by the tabernacle candle. And I can say that this symbol really shaped my life over the years. Even though I chose it as a young child, it really meant so much to me throughout my life. It even helped to form my personal ideal. So it's very, very important.
Who are you?
Here, the one on the left. Yeah. And this is my older sister, and she is the bell in the shrine. And when she was married, she moved far away from the family to Alaska with her husband. So she was very lonely, missed the family very much. But she told us, she meditated that she was the only member of the family who had the symbol outside of the shrine. Everybody else was inside the shrine. So, but my parents, whenever they would go to visit the shrine, they always had to ring the bell for my sister, and she knew that they were ringing the bell. And, even in their last years, when they were in their wheelchair and their walker, we would take them to the shrine, and they'd always ring the bell for my sister. And now that my parents are gone, I took that responsibility. And so I every shrine around the world, I ring the bell for her, and then now we can text, right away, and text say, I rang the bell for you. And it just gives her such joy, and it brings her near spiritually. And it's just because she loves the shrine. She has her own home shrine in Alaska. And so it's very, very important for her.
And Marge has the Schoenstatt record for the ringing of the bell in the most shrines around the world. She probably has, it's probably up in the 60 or 70 range.
And, Mike used to say, no, don't ring it again. Don't, they're going to like,
Especially if there's somebody inside. And I say, okay, I just quickly, ring the bell.
But now he's given up. He says, okay, go ahead, ring the bell. Yeah.
But she could find no cord in the bell in the shrine here. So she can't ring this bell.
I have to find a way.
The only way Marge is going to come back to Monterey is when the bell can be rung.
Oh, not true. So in Milwaukee, the home shrine developed in stages. First, like Mike said, with the living shrine, then came the dedication of the shrine, then the naming of the shrine, and crowning and just, now we have all these elements together, but then it was just being born. So my parents' home shrine name is Confidencia Heroica, heroic confidence. Heroic confidence. And then in the spirit of the Magnificat. And Mike's parents' home shrine is Ita Pater Stabat Mater. Many times they were made in Latin. And so that is, yes, Father, sorrowful mother standing beneath the cross. And we saw, especially our parents, living out of these ideals. They became, it's just because part of their souls, they just really lived them deeply. And it became, part of the very air we breathed in our homes. So it just is such a important beauty in the home. This is one of my younger sisters, and she's the candle in the shrine. And she's had many difficulties throughout her life. Difficult choices were made at times. And over the years, she did not feel at home in the Schoenstatt world. She just felt kind of outside of Schoenstatt. But the one connection that she always had in her heart was her symbol, the candle. She always wanted to be that light of Christ, shining in the world. And that was so her one contact, her one attachment with Schoenstatt was this symbol. And sometimes graces aren't recognized until many years later. So when she was in her 50s, she felt drawn to dedicate her own home shrine. She had grown over the years and she really understood the beauty of Schoenstatt and finally wanted her own home shrine. And the name and ideal of her shrine is One Heart. And she tells me, she feels the powerful graces that help root her in her faith and keep her strong through all the many difficulties that she continues to have in her life. She's standing there with her son. She's a single mom. And so she tells me how often she runs to the Blessed Mother with those great difficulties and what peace and joy she finds there and consolation. One of my brothers, it's just the brother that's just older than me, felt very strongly about the importance of the living shrine. And I'll share an example that he himself likes to share. In his late 20s, he had a very serious illness. He had a nervous breakdown. A little later, they found out he was bipolar. So he, a very serious nervous breakdown. And he says that he felt as if he was standing on the edge of an abyss, ready to fall into the darkness. And he said the further he grew away from Schoenstatt, away from his symbol, later he realized that my parents at that time were growing deeper into their spiritual life, into their symbols and how they could live those symbols and offering this as capital grace for my brother. And he says that he believes that this attachment of the spiritual attachment of this living shrine saved his life, he says. It really, really saved his life. And if you remember Father's words about my parents and their symbols, my father being St. Peter the Keys, opening the gates of heaven for his children through his own living and breathing in heaven. And my mother being the cross and bearing all on the cross for each child in need. And we saw them make this deep spiritual life their own. So they really just offered all of this for him. And so, we can say having a home shrine, even a home shrine that is blessed by Father Kentenich himself, doesn't mean we're always living in the clouds, that everything's perfect. We all have, the real crosses and sufferings, but we are never alone. And we're given those graces of the Blessed Mother to overcome whatever difficulties come our way.
And we watched the shaping and forming of the lives of our parents over time. My father had he had a very special relationship with Father Kentenich. It was as a son to a father. My father had a difficult relationship with his own father. His father had nervous breakdowns, numerous ones, and family life was just very chaotic. So he left home as soon as he could after he graduated high school and really didn't have that father-son relationship very close. But with Father Kentenich, he found a father. And he was educated how to be a father for his own children. Every morning before work, my father would get up about 4:30 in the morning and walk 2 miles to the shrine for Father's Mass at 6 o'clock in the morning. And then he would go to work. On Saturdays, sometimes my father would take us children with him, a couple of the older children he might take. And I remember walking the 2 miles, which would take us a half an hour to walk. And he would sing the Magnificat in Latin. And I still can hear that Magnificat, my father singing along the way. We would go to Father's Mass at 6 o'clock. And then we would go to Father's office. My father would knock on the door. Father would invite us in. And right inside the outside door was a little table in the hallway. And if there were children, he would set the children down at this little table. And then Father would disappear into the kitchen. And he'd come back a couple minutes later with anything he could find on the counters. It could be a piece of fruit, it could be a pancake, it could be potato chips, it could be cookies or a donut, whatever he found to keep us occupied. And then he and my father would go into his office, and my father would go to confession and have spiritual direction. And my father did this for over 3 years, almost every Saturday morning. This is the type of access we had to Father. You could call him up on the phone, he'd answer, and it was like he had nobody else, and you could just talk to him. You could ask him to come to your home. You could just, knock on his door. He'd open, he'd stop everything. We didn't think Father had anything to do. It was only years later he was writing these 500-page manifestos to Rome, and it was like, oh, Father, he has all the time in the world for us. So, and my father wasted no time in transforming his life from what it was before. My mother says he was a changed man, a changed husband, and a changed father. He gave everything for the family. It was only 11 years after Father left Milwaukee in 1977 that my father died, 1976. He died at 47 years old. There were 11 children still at home. I had just moved out to go to college. It was a year before Marge and I were married. And the youngest was 6 years old yet. But in those 11 years between when Father left Milwaukee and when he died, my father gave everything for the family. He quit his summer job. He was a teacher, and many times they earned a little extra money during the summer, but he quit it so he could be with the children and my mother. and he would take us to the parks. We didn't have money to go on vacations outside the city, but we had 10 bicycles. And he would take us on tours around the city, to the museum, to the library, to the parks, fishing, to the lakefront, the beach. And we never knew that we were poor. We never knew that we didn't have money to go on a vacation outside. We had all the time, fun times within the city. My father taught us how to work. We had an old house. A lot of things needed to be done, and we couldn't hire people to do them. So we learned how to do all the different carpentry and painting and concrete and everything that a house needs. I hated plumbing. I could never stop a leak. And my father would do all of the grocery shopping. He did all of the food, all of the clothes shopping. He would, for the kids. On weekends, he made all the meals so that my mother had rest because she cooked during the week. He would do all of the diapers, and that we had a lot of diapers. But this is what, for him, he knew he had to do with my mother. He knew she needed help, and he gave everything for her and us children. We had many of the problems after my father died of what many families had. We had the loss of faith. We had divorce in the family. We had education problems. But the Blessed Mother was always there to help. And Father's education and for my mother was invaluable, she said, to how to raise the children after my father died. And for us, the home shrine was the example of what Vatican II called the domestic church. It was a physical reality within the home to build the domestic church, both as a place, a holy place, and as a family, as a domestic church. And Father guided our families on this liturgical life of faith, how to bring faith into daily life. We don't only practice our faith on Sunday, and then nothing happens during the week. So we had many traditions, and one of those traditions that my father developed was, you see this crown of thorns that my father is giving to Father Kentenich. And this was, he made this crown out of a thorn tree, and during Lent, we would put rose petals for every offering we made to the Blessed Mother, or in Lent, we could put a rose petal on the thorns, so that even the smallest of children could understand the idea of the capital of grace. And then on Easter Sunday, my father presented it to Father Kentenich to give it to the Blessed Mother. But these are the types of traditions that Father wanted the families to do to really bring that faith into the family. This is a tradition that we have practiced all of our married life. This is our home shrine. Many of our friends in our couples that we meet at church do this. And we even had a Protestant family come to our home, and they saw this in our home shrine and says, we want to do this too. This is really something special. So even your home shrine can be this evangelization center that the Blessed Mother uses.
These next pictures are of September 15th, 1965, the night before Father left Milwaukee to go back to Rome. And that evening, Father was able to visit 2 home shrines, and one of those was our home shrine. My parents had invited him a couple weeks before to come to our home shrine for a special celebration in the home shrine. And then everybody heard that Father was called back to Rome. And so we thought he would not come. But thankfully, he made the decision to come to our home. And yeah, he went to our home shrine and then one other family's home shrine. And we knew, or many people found out where he was. Everybody wanted Father that last night to come or to be with them. And the sisters, just everybody. And so our phone kept ringing and ringing, but we didn't answer it at all. Yeah. So, but you see, Father a bit serious here. You can imagine him, standing there in our home shrine, our place of grace, offering what's coming, to the Blessed Mother, and just putting all there in her heart. And we think that Father chose to come to 2 home shrines that evening because of the great importance he placed on marriage and family life, and how he was able to work with the families for those 14 years. And also the home shrine, that was that great gift that was given through him to the family during that time of his exile. And it's so beautiful to see the uniqueness of each home shrine, which you all know. It's as an individual as each family, each member of the family. And our parents' home shrine was, so important, such a part of their lives until the day they died. This is my parents' home shrine, the Confidencia Heroica in the Spirit of the Magnificat home shrine. Oh, and now this shrine, my parents' home shrine, is in what we call the Father Kentenick Hall at the shrine in Milwaukee area. So everybody can visit there. And that there's the kneeler there that Father knelt on, and we always have to go and kneel on his kneeler. And so the faithfulness of our parents to the shrine never ended, until the day they died. And from their home shrine, 6 of their home shrine of heroic confidence, 6 new shrines were born in our family. The only one that doesn't have a home shrine is my oldest brother at this time. Maybe someday he will, yeah. Yeah.
This is my parents' home shrine, the Ite Pater Stabat Mater, where all of the cares of daily life were taken. And here is where our spiritual roots went down deep, that allowed the children to fly away, but know they always had a home to come back to. They would always be loved unconditionally. I had a brother who rejected our family. He wanted nothing to do with us. He became involved with the wrong type of friends. He became involved with a married woman who hated my mother. He experimented with drugs, and he eventually went to jail. For years, we tried to get in contact, and he moved and would never contact us. When we found out where he lived, we would send a letter sometimes asking, to try to have him come home. And we would get a letter back filled with hateful accusations of what he said we had done to him. And this went on for years. At one point, my mother was very sick and we thought she might die. So I wrote him and I said, Pat, you need to come home. Mom may die and you don't want to have her die without reconciling with her. You will feel guilty at some point in your life. And I said, if I have done anything to cause you to leave the family, please forgive me, but come home to Mom. We got another letter back the same as always. And one day I was home early from work, which was unusual, and the telephone rang, and it was my brother. Marge answered the phone and he said, "This is Pat." That was the first time we had heard his voice in 20 years. And he said he was in jail and he was afraid to talk to me because Marge said, "You have to talk to Mike." And he said he was afraid to, and she said, "Pat, don't worry." So we talked for the next 2.5 hours. He told me he was in jail, that his wife had put him there on false charges, and he just didn't know how to fight this battle. So he went to jail. He said she had taken everything, all the bank accounts. She had sold the house, had sold his business. He was a cabinet maker, sold all of his tools, his trucks. Everything was gone. And he had hit the bottom of his life. He said a friend of his had said, "Have you ever talked to your mother? Have you ever called your mother?" And he said, "No." And so this friend went on the internet and found my telephone number. And then that's why he called me. So I told him about all the brothers and sisters who are now married. I was the only one married when he had left the family. He had only met our daughter, Sarah, and now there were 23 nephews and nieces he had never met. And at the end of our conversation, he said, would I call my mother and my brothers and sisters for him? And I said, "No, Pat, you have to do that." And you could tell he was very, very afraid. And I said, "Pat, we have been praying in our home shrines for 20 years for this exact moment." I said, "Everybody will welcome you back." That night, or that after we hung up, I called my mother and I said, "Mom, if someone calls you tonight, if the phone rings, please pick it up. Don't let it go to the answering machine." And she says, "Okay." And that's all I said. That night, my brother called her. Again, the first time in 20 years he had spoken to her. The next weekend was Mother's Day, and he received a pass to visit her from jail. That weekend, he called all of my brothers and sisters, and everybody welcomed him back. As we say, it's the classic story of the prodigal son, but with one exception. Everybody welcomed him back unconditionally. No conditions were put on him coming back to the family, no matter how much he hurt them. He immediately went to confession. He came back to the church. He even worked for the Schoenstatt sisters as a carpenter for them in the shrine and in their houses. He built his business back. He had his marriage to this other woman annulled, and he found a wonderful woman, a very motherly woman, is the type of woman he needed to heal all the wounds that he had over his life. And he is a wonderful man at this point and husband. I also am the work as the person of the family altar in the United States. And he builds all of the family altars for me. He has built me 1,000 family altars and has not charged me anything. He said, if I can help one person come to God, that's what I want. And you can tell he's doing reparation for what he has done in the past. And it's just a testament to the beauty of the home shrine, to the education of our Father, of how we are to build these families, these domestic churches, if we practice our everyday faith and give in hope for no matter what comes in the future. This is a picture of our family after my brother came back the first time. He's this one here, Pat, the second oldest. And when we went to Brazil, somebody in Brazil asked me, he said, how have you lived your living shrine symbol in your adult life? And I had to think for a moment because nobody has ever asked me that question. And I thought of the story of my brother, because when Father Kenton came to dedicate our home shrine, our living shrine symbols, my symbol is St. Michael. And he said, St. Michael has two purposes, two tasks. One is to protect the Eucharist, and one is to keep the devil out of the family. My brother is the Eucharist, his symbol. And of anybody in our family he could have called, he called me with the symbol of St. Michael. So Father, in connecting our symbols 40 years before, now we're spiritually united in this act within the family. And that's what Father talked about with these attachments, these symbols of the living shrine, that they're more than just a little child's fancy. It's serious attachments of life in the family. Oh, which one am I? I'm right here. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And my mother, after my brother came back, you could see she had regained 10 years on her life. Her whole physical appearance changed just with that worry of 20 years gone. It was an amazing transformation that we saw. This is my sister Therese. She's one of my younger sisters. And she was called home by God in September of 2015 when she was 50 years old. Marge and I were in Cabo Rojo, Puerto Rico, at our annual meeting of our Family Institute. And we had just got up, getting ready to go to Mass in the shrine with our Institute course. And I received a telephone call saying my sister had just died that night suddenly, and there was no apparent reason for her collapsing and dying. And we went to Mass, and during Mass, I took this picture in the middle. And you remember the symbols of my father and mother, the wine and the chalice, and my sister is the Holy Spirit. And it's as if Father is, or my parents are once again offering their daughter to God. For me, I will never see a consecration in the shrine in any other light than that. But again, that's the beauty of these symbols, to create life, to create attachment, but to also give meaning to many of the difficult aspects of life. This is my sister Anne Marie. Remember the little girl with the tabernacle? What Father was showing her, the little picture, that's her. She died a couple of years ago at the age of 55 of breast cancer. She was very affected by my father's death. She was 11 years old. That's a very tender age for a girl in a relationship with her father. And she was very affected. And I didn't know this till the time when she was sick here, that she was very depressed and had many anxieties, because she said my father abandoned her. So she had this feeling of abandonment by her father, and she really never recovered from that. She moved with her husband away to Texas. So she sort of almost pulled herself away many times from the family. She didn't communicate with us much at all. We'd send a text and maybe we'd get a text back, but most likely not. And we visited her, but it was just that she was suffering so much. And I never really knew about that suffering until this point. Her husband called us and said she had stage 4 breast cancer, and she was having a deep crisis of faith. because of her depressions and her anxieties, she didn't even trust doctors. So she never went to the doctor when she knew she had the signs of breast cancer. She never told her husband. She was so closed in that she couldn't reveal things to people. It was very difficult. So she felt she was committing suicide because she had not taken care of herself. So we texted. By this time, she was difficult for her to talk, and she had a breathing tube. And so we texted and we said, no, that is not the situation. You are not responsible. You had a disease. You had an illness that had taken over your life, and you didn't know how to get out of that. God is blessing you, and he is always with you. And it was amazing to see how she transformed. She only lived 2 months after we found out, but in those 2 months, she transformed her life. She came out of herself, and she wrote some of the most beautiful texts to us. And she wrote me and she says, how do I offer my suffering for others? How can I do this? So we would talk, and I said, maybe she had made her covenant of love when she was a small girl in Marge's girls group. But I didn't know if she practiced or she had anything to do with Schoenstatt. So I said, well, maybe she may be open to the blank check. So I sent her material on the blank check to offer her the future of what she has to God, to the Blessed Mother. And I sent her the material. And after she died, her husband said one of the things she wanted to do, he told her, was to go to the shrine. And she had not visited the shrine. I don't think she visited the shrine in Austin ever. And she lived in the city there. And so the husband took her to the shrine. And when she opened the door of the shrine, adoration was going on with the tabernacle wide open, her symbol. And for me, I think she probably did her blank check consecration at that moment in the shrine, giving everything to God. And it was such a beautiful experience. Before she died, I called her husband and I said, he wasn't Catholic, but he would go to mass with her every Sunday. And I said, in the church, we have the last sacrament of the sick. And I said, it's a beautiful time of grace. And I said, you may want to consider that. Talk with Anne. I said, because I know the Schoenstatt priest there that can come and do that with you. And he said, okay, I'll talk. So that night he talked, and the next morning, very early, he called me and says, please have him come immediately, because she went into a coma that night. And so one of the Schoenstatt fathers came over, gave her the last rites, spent some time of prayer and the rosary with her, even though she couldn't speak, but her husband was there. And her husband said, after she died, he said to me, at that moment of the time when the priest came to give her the last rites and Father visited her twice before she died, he said, for the first time, I understood the depth of Anne's feelings for her faith. He understood the Catholic faith better because of that experience. And now we pray for him that maybe he comes into the church at some time. And I'm sure Anne is doing all she can for that effort too. And we visited my sister 2 times in Austin, Marge and I, and we never talked about Schoenstatt. She didn't have any Schoenstatt things around. But after her funeral, and she was so private, she just didn't talk about those things. After the funeral, her husband was cleaning some things out, and he sent me this picture. This is my sister's home shrine in her bedroom. And all this time she had a home shrine, but she never talked about it. So you knew something it was always in her heart. And it was such a beautiful closure for us to know how she had carried Schoenstatt in her life, in a very silent and very difficult life. But again, once again, it goes to this building of the Nazareth family in our families, and looking at what Father has to teach us in this respect, and what great crosses, but also what graces come out of this. This is my mother in her home shrine. A couple years before she died in 2020. And this is the home shrine that Father blessed, and where she takes all of her, how many were there? There's like 39 grandchildren, and at that time, 5 great-grandchildren. And one of the things my mother did was she said, I want Marge and I to have her home shrine picture. So we just recently blessed our home shrine and replaced this picture as our home shrine picture now, the one that Father blessed. And we kept the crown and everything.
So from these 2 home shrines of our parents, the Heroic Confidence home shrine, Ita Pater home shrine, our home shrine was born, the home in the hands of the Father. This was rooted in love and confidence in the reality of the grace, this great gift that Father gave to us. And the home shrine touches all life. We learned a beautiful custom in Costa Rica when we visited to speak with the families there. There was a grandmother who told us that, well, we visited their home and saw their home shrine, and it was very similar to our home shrine. We have kind of a tall altar in the home shrine that the children, can't really relate to it. And this grandmother built a little grandchild's home shrine next to their home shrine. And we thought, what a great idea. So we came home and we did that. And this is our oldest little James when he was about 2.5, visiting us, and just that little, every time they come to visit, it's like boom, right to the little home shrine. Of course, I do have one of those little jars, for the Capital of Grace. And sometimes, or when they come, always, yeah, right. There's a little treat in the in the little jar, so they and so to see what new treat. And
the Blessed Mother asked for.
Yes. And our little Ellie, a couple of years ago, when she was probably 6, she said, "Do the angels really put that there? Put that treat there?" And I said, well, I help them a little bit. Oh, but so it's just, so when they come, then if they stay overnight, we have a bell there and they ring the little bell. Yeah, 3 bells now. Yeah, just, so then they say, it's time to pray. At nighttime, they ring their little bells, and there's so many wonderful things they enjoy. And then the home shrine continues through the generations. This is our daughter when she had her home shrine dedicated in her apartment. And the name of her home shrine is Cause of Our Joy. And her symbol is the candle. And it relates so beautifully to her home shrine because she is a joyful, bright person who brings light into every corner of her life. Oh, yeah.
When Marge's parents were 90 and 91, they came to live with us. They needed full-time care, so we had them come and live with us. And the first thing they moved in was their home shrine. So we had 2 home shrines in our house. But it was they only lived with us 1 year before both of them died within 2 months of each other. But it was a beautiful experience of watching this couple who for 60 years had lived their covenant of love, and how they were preparing for death. They knew it was coming soon. And for us, how they lived their Schoenstatt life. we had a little apartment built at the end of our house, and we had a door that would slide shut if they wanted privacy. So sometimes they would have a little argument. They'd close the door, and you knew they were having their Schoenstatt hour, their marriage dialogue. And the door would then open, and then life went on. But how they lived their covenant life and their daily living of the practices of Schoenstatt and the church. They were both in the end in wheelchairs, but they would never miss Sunday Mass. It took them 2 hours to get ready because of Marge's father had a stroke and was paralyzed. So it was an immense testimony to our children, to the grandchildren that would come, to the nephews and nieces that would visit, and even our parish priests. When Marge's father died first, and after his funeral, there were a beautiful experience with the priest that had given him the last rites. After he had given the last rites, he told us it was such a beautiful experience for him. And he said, this isn't common. This isn't like it always is. That's such a peaceful passing. And the next Monday at Mass, the Monday morning Mass, he gave his homily on a holy death and related his experience of coming to anoint Marge's mother. And when, after the funeral, we came home, and, everybody's a little sad. And I received an email from this family. This is a family in our Family Institute in Spain. And they said, we are praying for you. You are in our hearts, in our home shrine. And you can see underneath the picture of the Blessed Mother is the picture of Marge's parents with our family that I had sent them, with our Christmas letter. But Marge and I knew the family, and it was such a beautiful experience, a beautiful testimony of how across the world we are one. Without even knowing the person sometimes, we are one family, connected as families through our home shrines.
So we thank Father and our Blessed Mother for this great gift of the home shrine. That beautiful net of shrines circling the globe across countries, continents, oceans, and cultures, showing that we are truly family of families, attached and connected from shrine to shrine, creating this net of shrines across the world. And we believe that the home shrine is the greatest gift that Schoenstatt has to offer to our church and world, where marriage and family life is transformed and united in the natural and the supernatural realities. It's a true and vital means of conquering that new shore and fostering attachments across the oceans and into eternity.
You've probably seen this picture before. This picture was taken when I was 8 years old in Milwaukee. At that time, the Schoenstatt sisters were looking to build a shrine and retreat center, a training center in the Milwaukee area. And they would go out and look for possible land to build on. And when they found a possible piece of land, they would invite Father, or Father wanted to see it. So he would say, okay, let's go out and see it. And when the Schoenstatt family would know that Father was going to be out on a walk on some piece of land, they get on the telephone and everybody would start showing up for the walk with Father. And one Sunday, my father heard about it and took a couple of us children for that event. And at some point in the walk, I must have been next to Father. He took my hand and the picture was taken. We didn't know about this picture for many years. I think 12, 15 years, we didn't know it existed. but but after we knew about it, we understood it was famous all over South America already and in Germany. And the priest who had come from Germany to give the retreat for Marge's parents and my parents, because they're both in the Family Institute. And so it was the annual meeting, and he came to give a retreat on childlikeness. And he put this picture in front of his desk, in front of the couples, and my mother took a look at that and says, "I know that boy." And my father's first reaction to that picture was, that will be a famous picture someday. Unbeknownst to him, it was already there. But he understood what that picture said. I didn't understand that as a young teenager growing up in the 20s. People would ask me for a testimony of what was it like to be with Father, and what was he like, and what did you do? And it was like, well, there must be other adults that can speak to that question much better than the remembrances of an 8-year-old or a 10-year-old boy. And because I didn't understand what that picture said. And it was through a few events that I came to an understanding. And one of those was in 1998, the Holy Father, John Paul II, called all the movements of the church to Rome for Pentecost. And Marge and I had been asked if we could attend it as representing Schoenstatt in the USA. And there was a woman from Brazil, a young woman from Brazil, and her grandmother there representing Schoenstatt in Brazil. And we were sitting, waiting for the Holy Father's Mass on May 31st on Pentecost. And we were waiting for like 5 or 6 hours because we wanted front row seats. And at some point in our conversation, the grandmother of this girl realized that I was the boy in that picture. And all of a sudden she started crying. And the granddaughter said, this is her grandmother's favorite picture of Father Kentenich, because she can always place herself in the place of that little boy. And so I had one little picture about this big in my wallet, one left, and I signed the back of it, and I gave it to the grandmother. And she started crying all over again. But it was through that experience and a couple more that really taught me what that picture said to people, especially people who never knew, most people never had met Father Kentenich. But this picture was very special to them of how they could relate to Father. From then on, I was never embarrassed to talk about the picture or my 8-year-old memories of Father. For many years later, Schoenstatt's sister told me why Father took my hand. Because we always thought, well, this boy was walking next to him and he just took his hand. But the ground was an old farm and the land was a little bit rough, and Father was concerned that he might lose his balance. And he didn't want to take the arm of an adult, but he would accept the hand of a child. And it's a beautiful meditation that you can have, that we don't only need Father, but Father needs us to be his children. So our prayer for you, and in a postscript to the story with the lady from Brazil, grandmother, was that when we visited Brazil in 2013, we were able to visit that young woman and her family and the grandmother again. And it was a beautiful meeting. And when the grandmother died just a couple years ago, the granddaughter sent us the crucifix here that was on her grandmother's home shrine, because she just wanted that crucifix to come to me because of that grandmother's relationship to us and how divine providence had brought us together in that beautiful attachment. So it's in our little grandchildren's home shrine now. And for us, our prayer is that you always remain in the hands of our Father, as a child of our Father. That is our security, especially in these times, these difficult times of the accusations against our Father, that we remain faithful to him, to his ideals, to his mission, and our Schoenstatt mission. So we thank you. And Father never, whenever you visited Father, you always went away with a gift. Sometimes it was a spiritual gift, but many times it was physical. Father would reach into his pocket, and who knew what was in his pocket? It could be a piece of candy. It could be a rosary. It could be a medal. It could be a piece of fruit. There was an apple tree next to the exile shrine, and he would love taking apples from it and throwing it to the children. So we have a gift from Father for you, for each of you, a gift from Father. So thank you.
Muchas gracias, Mike y Marge, por esta hermosa plática que nos han compartido.
We want to thank you for this beautiful talk that you've given us, and for sharing your time and being here with us, and we appreciate it very much.
Gracias por el testimonio, por lo que nos han dado, por su tiempo, por ese regalo que tenemos todos los schoenstattianos y la iglesia del Santuario Hogar que nos inspira y nos motiva también.
And thank you for your testimony, and show us this gift that we have in Schoenstatt with the home shrines, that it's our gift from Schoenstatt to the church.
Y gracias también por acercarnos a nuestro Padre, por unirnos con el corazón. Nos llevamos un gran tesoro para nuestros hogares, para nuestras familias.
Yes, and thank you for bringing us closer to Father, and we take him in our hearts to our families.
Bueno, y aquí también les tenemos un pequeño regalo para que lo lleven a su Santuario Hogar y nos recuerden a todos y nos lleven en el corazón, y aquí los esperamos nuevamente.
Yes, and like Father always had something to give, well, we have a little something for you also.
Bueno, para los que conocen, es una réplica de nuestro santuario María Camino al Cielo y tiene grabado el nombre de su santuario hogar. Home in the hands of our Father. Aquí, gracias Alicia, también tan bonitos que los hace.
I have to tell you, I really wanted one of these. I saw it in Ligia Memo's home shrine and Flora and Miguel's, and I asked here at the office store, and there weren't any. So it's like, perfect gift. Thank you.
Bueno, aquí nos dice y era un pequeño secreto que teníamos para ustedes, a little secret. Bueno, les agradecemos a todos su presencia. Tenemos un pequeño convivio allá en La Palapa y terminamos con la consagración a la Mater. We finish with the consecration.
Sí. Gracias, Matt, por poder reunirnos aquí, compartir con Mike y Marge este testimonio tan hermoso de vida, de la la experiencia de tener un santuario hogar. Y nos queremos consagrar a ti esta noche, consagrar a todas nuestras familias, nuestros hijos. Oh Señora mía, que con Cristo su Hijo. Bueno, muchas gracias y bueno, pues pasamos a la palapa si quieren al convivio. Y Mike tiene las fotos también aquí para al ratito ahí también que vayan recibiendo.